international people. This is Louise Uwachu broadcasting live from Vancouver, Canada. Thank you for being with us. This is Thursday, December 6th, 2012. Countdown to the end of the world. Goodbye to all the people who believe you're going to die. Oh my God, tell the devil we have heard that one before. Oh my God. So as if we didn't have enough bad news such as the end of the world, we are now talking about Congo, the cost in blood versus the profits in dollars. Because as you know, when there's a war, there's people getting killed and there's people getting rich. So we just want to know which one is which. And I mean, I'm sorry, but the world is just so cynical. So cynical. And every situation is just reversed on the other side, and it's just up to us to try and see both sides in order to understand the global picture, as cynical as it may be, and then see how we can deal with it. So today on the show, it's going to be interesting. We have someone who's written a very interesting article that some of you who read these Canadian newsletters about international issues may have received. So we'll bring him in and we'll get into the topic. Good evening, Mr. Cook.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hi, Mr. Seamus Cook. How would you like us to call you?
Mr. Cook is fine. Seamus Cook is fine. Whatever you'd like.
All right. What does Seamus mean? Where's that from?
It's actually an Irish name. It's Gaelic for James.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice. I didn't know that. I guess now I know. James. So that's James in Irish.
Yeah, Seamus is James in Irish, yes.
Do you speak the Gaelic language?
No, I don't. I'm American. My grandfather was born in Ireland.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. So how did you become interested in the Congo? It's just,
well,
it's not a Congolese name, right?
Well, you know what's interesting about the Congo is that how little most of us know about it, especially in the U.S., I would say, but I think elsewhere as well. There is very little information about not only one, but there's been two Holocausts in the Congo in its history. The first under the colonization by Belgium, King Leopold, where it's estimated that 10 million Congolese lost their lives. And then we have the Congo War that ended in 2003, where 6 million people died. And many people would argue that that war never stopped. The official war ended in 2003, but there's been ongoing conflicts in the Congo. And most of us never learn about 6 million people dying, and very few of us learn about the causes of that war.
Yeah. So how did you become interested in the situation in Congo? What triggered your interest?
Well, I think I've always been interested. You know, in the U.S., there's a popular consciousness around Rwanda, and but again, those two conflicts are connected, the Congo and Rwanda, and we aren't really ever told about that either.
Mm-hmm.
But one day I picked up a book called Africa's World War that explains the interconnection between the Congo and Rwanda. It's a very good book written by a French journalist, very well researched. And then he kind of explains the entire conflict, how the Rwandan genocide led into the Congolese war and the causes behind it.
Mm-hmm. And so you've recently written an article which appeared also in the Global Research. This is how we found out about you. And then as we were researching about you, we found out that you do a lot of interesting things. You know, tell the listeners about the other related social issues that you work in, and then how it connects to this issue in Congo and how you came to write that article?
That's a good question. I'd say, primarily I write about U.S. politics and economics and labor issues as well. But I try to really pay attention to international news, and I'm very interested in general humanitarian issues in the U.S. and abroad, and so I think the direct connection to the U.S. and the Congo is that we are supporting regimes like Uganda and Rwanda that are responsible for the Congo Holocaust. So my country is supporting those countries towards really horrific ends, and we are never taught about that. So when I first learned about the Congo War, the first Congo War, it really, made me feel deeply for the Congolese, and opened my eyes to my own responsibility as a U.S. citizen to learn about these atrocities and educate others as well.
Mm-hmm. So this article that you have is called Humanitarian Cover-Up. Why is Obama silent over the new Congo War? And so, did you just answer that because the U.S. support is behind the war, or what do you think is the explanation for Obama's silence?
Well, what's interesting is one of the reasons he's silent about the war is because, Rwanda is a key ally of the U.S. We train their soldiers, we give them aid. We are their most important ally, and it's not in dispute that Rwanda is behind the war in the Congo right now. There's been a UN panel of experts who've done research, and they've concluded decisively that this is their words were it's a Rwandan creation.
Mm-hmm.
This is the M23 militia that it's called, and but really it's a Rwandan-made militia led by Rwandan military officers. So the U.S. Pretends that that's not conclusive. They offer a cover-up in the UN as far as taking action against this militia, taking action against Rwanda. And the U.S. media also pretends like this is still a question that hasn't been solved yet, whether or not Rwanda is responsible for the war in the Congo. Mm-hmm. But people in the Congo, they know for a fact that's what's happening. They've lived through the last war where Rwanda invaded. So, for instance, in the city of Goma in the Congo, that was taken over by rebels a couple of weeks ago, there was a large demonstration of Congolese women, and they held a gigantic banner that said, "Rwandans out, Obama intervene now." Mm-hmm. That demonstration did not find its way in the U.S. media, but it was significant, and it shows you the Congolese know exactly what's happening, and for Obama to intervene to stop Rwanda, all he would have to say, is withdraw immediately, or else you will get your aid cut off. He can sever relations diplomatically. He can take many actions to not only publicize what's going on, but directly affect the Rwandan government if you so choose. Mm-hmm. So, for example, how he's treating Iran right now. The sanctions of various kinds. He could do the same thing for Rwanda, but he chooses not to because Rwanda is serving the U.S. interest by doing what it's doing right now in the Congo.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that the country that benefits most from the war could be the U.S. because, otherwise, why would they be at war? Why would they be supporting a country against another country? Why would all these people be dying?
Well, yeah, exactly. And to be even more specific, a key way the U.S. benefits is that prior to the current regime in the Congo, there was a more... So I guess we have to back up a little bit and explain that The first Congo War was started when Rwanda and Uganda jointly invaded the Congo, and that war ended in 2003. And they installed a puppet, essentially, who was an ally to them, and a puppet who opened the Congo's resources to U.S. corporations, and also was subservient to the IMF, which is controlled by the U.S. as well, U.S. banks specifically. So after a while, the puppet in the Congo became less of a puppet, and realized that the country was being robbed essentially by corporations who were for next to nothing, taking very, very wealthy countries' minerals out of the ground and paying next to nothing in taxes and not helping the country at all. So the Congolese president demanded to renegotiate the contracts of these corporations. And also he demanded new terms from the IMF because the Congo is in debt from the IMF. And if you're in debt from the IMF, what happens basically is the IMF takes over your economy. They tell you what you must do, the services you must cut, the terms of the loans, So the Congolese president said, you know what, this is a bad deal for our country. We want to renegotiate these contracts with corporations. And not only that, but we want a new partner, and they chose China because China has a less demanding foreign policy in its relations to its allies. So it does infrastructural projects. China's not, they have their own self-interest, and they're not a virtuous country. But when it comes to having a partner, they are much better than the U.S. when it comes to loans and economic relations.
So even you, as an American, you'd rather go in business with Chinese than with America? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is many African countries are choosing China for that reason. They offer better terms, offer better terms on their loans, and they offer not only to provide financial assistance, but they offer infrastructural assistance. And the U.S. is not really interested in helping countries' infrastructure. They're interested in enslaving countries via debt and profiting from their raw materials. And Congo, many people have said, is the richest country in the world when it comes to having the amounts of raw materials it has. But it's
what you're saying is that the reaction to the Congo choosing a better partner, logically in every sense, is war. If you don't accept us to enslave you, we're going to kill you. Is that the solution that has been applied?
Well, yeah. That's essentially how a U.S. ally becomes an enemy. The Congo was an ally when it was subservient to the IMF and allowed corporations to act freely. But as soon as those conditions changed, the government had to be overthrown. And right now we are in the middle of watching this invasion and attempted overthrow of the government because essentially the Congo has backed away from being a U.S. puppet.
Now, what about the people who say the same about Rwanda, that if Rwanda has been a U.S. puppet and now they don't want to be dealing with the Rwandan president anymore, so someone made a comment saying that the best way would be to provoke a war in Congo and then have it backfire. There was an article the other day talking about how the U.S. military is going to go in from Congo and have a coup d'etat in those countries.
There'd be no reason to have a coup d'etat for the U.S. in Rwanda or Uganda because they do what we want pretty much at this time. So I think the coup d'etat was meant for the Congo to try to overthrow that government.
So this idea of people saying, "Oh, there's so much blood on Rwanda's president, and there's so much drama on Uganda's president, and the U.S. may be trying to get rid of dictators," that's not valid. The real the real victim in this and the real people that are getting truly invaded and the real regime change that we can expect to happen, or these rebels that are aiming, is for the Congo.
That's right. But I would add also that the U.S. is under a lot of pressure because the atrocities being committed are becoming wider and wider publicized, and therefore there's more pressure on the U.S. to act decisively against the Rwandan president and the Ugandan president, because these stories are getting out now, and the atrocities are openly recognized by the UN. It's just that the U.S. has used its power in the UN to kind of hide these reports that are being released. Or they don't appear in the U.S. media barely. They're contested in the U.S. media. The media's representation of the Congan conflict is just ridiculous. It's confusing. You don't really know what's happening, and that's actually one way I believe that it creates disinformation creates a sense of hopelessness for people trying to understand a situation. And if you don't understand a situation, you don't really care about it. It doesn't make sense, and you ignore it.
So, in your view, what is the essence of the situation that people should understand, and how should they react to it, especially for us who are here in North America, who get all the benefits of the war in Congo, while the people in Congo are, dying?
Well, I think, a good way to frame it in a truthful way is that, the Congolese have an independent country. They have elected president. They're a democratic nation, and they're being invaded by a foreign country, Rwanda. And Rwanda is backed by the U.S. And, I think we have to, first of all, spread the information so people know about what's happening, because the last war killed 6 million people, and it could, we're in a very tense situation where a huge bloodbath could happen again. These people have suffered terribly, and it's our responsibility to share information about that, but also to, petition our government and to demand them to take whatever action they can to help prevent the bloodshed. This doesn't mean a military intervention. I'm not advocating that. But cutting off aid is a good demand, I think, to Rwanda and Uganda for their role in this, and being internationally public about what's happening, and using diplomatic means to isolate those countries, because they are the aggressors in this case. The Congolese are the victims.
Now, what do you think about this suggestion to the Congolese government to negotiate with the rebels? Why is it that most countries in the West say we could never negotiate with terrorists, but yet when a country like Congo is invaded and these people are killing the innocent population, they tell them to negotiate? It's not just Congo, it's the same situation in Mali. They tell them to negotiate. Why should they negotiate?
That's a great question, and that's another proof positive, the bias in the media and in the government about what's happening. Of course, the Congo has no reason to negotiate with an invading army. But that's really, what's being reported, that the Congolese government should negotiate with these invaders. And you have to ask yourself, well, what are they going to negotiate? Well, probably they're going to negotiate about, contracts for extracting raw materials. Probably they're going to negotiate about, the military. Maybe government positions, all kinds of things that the Congolese have no interest in negotiating because they are an independent country. But the invading army is demanding that they negotiate over these things that, the Congolese should never negotiate about. So you're right, it's a very interesting conversation happening in the media about...
So it's as if, let's say I invade your house, and then I say, okay, now let's negotiate how much of your things, your property, that you're going to give me for me who have invaded your house. Let's negotiate how much of your property that I am going to have. in your
That's
house.
that's a perfect analogy, and it really shows the limited awareness and the bias in the media that's accepted as a narrative in our media.
Uh-huh. So now, who is financing the operation? Because I always say, like, in sports, you get the sponsor's name. In the Olympics, you get who sponsored who. But in war, you never get the sponsor's name. You just get, oh, it's these tribal wars in the middle of nowhere in Africa. But who are the sponsors of this war?
You know, that's well said. Good question. Well, the direct sponsors in this war is determined by the UN, is the Rwandan government. And then you have to go even further and say, well, who is the sponsor of Rwanda? And that goes back to the United States. So that's how you trace back the sponsors of a war. Who's backing who? And when you trace that back to the U.S., ultimately we are the ones responsible for this war.
Mm-hmm. So what can American citizens do about it? Because I suppose this is your tax money that you would
Right.
like to go and pay for your education.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say again that I think in a conflict like this, where there's so little awareness, very, very little awareness happening about this conflict. So that's the first step, I think, is we have to educate each other about what's happening. And beyond that, I would hope that once this conflict gets more into the attention of the media and the awareness, that you will see campaigns similar to, in the U.S., for example, there's a strong movement in favor of Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
There was a strong movement against apartheid in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it really takes to shift the policy of the government. Enough people not only aware, but who are ready to act. So I hope that this is a situation where it gets to that point where awareness gets to the level of action that we can influence our government, its hand in this conflict.
I see. Awareness, something so important. Now, why do you think, for example, that the people are so aware of the Holocaust, the genocide against the Jews in Europe, in Germany, more than they are about this genocide against Congo? Because as you have said before, even before this war, there was King Leopold, who killed so many more people than Hitler, and yet in the world in which we live in order to speak of evil, they always refer to Hitler. But there is someone worse than Hitler, and this person happens to the Congo. So
That's
why, right. Why do you think that, that gets more awareness and the Congolese doesn't get the attention? And why is that?
I would argue that it's pure racism. It's interesting. Let's take the Rwandan genocide, for example. In the U.S., we are taught about the genocide, but we're not really taught why it ever happened. So the popular perception of many African countries in the U.S. is that we are taught about all these atrocities happening in these countries. We're never taught why they happen. So I think it's natural for one to make a racist assumption. If you don't have all the information and you're just told that these people kill each other for no reason, in the U.S. especially, we have a very racist history, that I think that assumption is made. And it applies to the Congo also. So 6 million people died in the Congo. Well, that's a horrible atrocity. But, I don't know why it happened, and I just have to assume that the people in Africa are barbaric. There's maybe the word savage is used often in these cases, and these are all racist words, and I think the media and the government uses racism in these conflicts to prevent people from taking action. And it's always, I think it's on an unconscious level for people, because and the U.S. were not aware of why these conflicts happen. But really, there's no other explanation why 6 million people died in the Congo, and it's no one knows about it, versus 6 million people who die under the Nazis, and it's international news in history.
Yeah. And it's the reference for evil in our world.
Correct. Yes.
So
as we ignore evil in the Congo.
Yeah. I guess we need to redefine evil.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely, we do. Because evil is, it's the lens of the people telling the news is who we are told is evil or not evil. So we overlook evil if it's happening in our favor. And if evil happens, let's say in Libya or Syria, we condemn governments for those actions and use that lens to attack them.
Mhm. Yeah, very interesting. Evil happening in our favor, that's good.
Mhm.
And evil against us, that's evil. That's real evil.
Yeah, it's pure manipulation of world events and manipulating the public into looking at world events as our government would like us to look at them.
Mhm. Oh, I see. So that the government may have support for these policies that are anti-human.
Right, and we're not told about the truth behind that, and those atrocities are ignored. Whereas if, a non-ally of the U.S. commits an atrocity, we are told in the media every day about that atrocity.
Mhm. Wow, this is really some crazy story. Now, what would be the best solution for Congo if Congo was to define, if you were Congolese, because I mean clearly you care and you know so much about the situation. And so what do you think would be the best solution for them?
Well, I mean, ideally they would have their borders respected. Ideally, the international community would come to their protection. Through the UN and the U.S. and Obama would also support the Congolese' right as a nation, its sovereign status. And that would mean that the Rwandan troops and the so-called M23 militia leave the country, and that this country is, allowed to live an independent existence without foreign intruders. Its whole history is so full of foreign countries and corporations eluding it, and just taking and the people are so poor. So allowing this country to actually develop, using its own resources and using those for the people in the country.
Mhm. Because I mean, it's like you cannot find a time in history where the Congolese have actually been independent lately. When is the last time that they have been independent?
Well, God, the history is so awful. Their first election, I believe it was 1963. Patrice Lumumba, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
After he was elected president of the Congo, he had a very, pro-Congolese vision of his country, and he was assassinated shortly afterwards. And there wasn't another real election in the Congo until after the Congolese War in 2003. So, there's these tiny windows of democracy, and when the leaders of the Congo use these elections in a kind of Congo-centric vision of the country, they are overthrown instantly. It's not allowed to happen. The country is not being allowed to develop as an independent country.
Mhm.
So, and that's throughout its entire history.
So, what is to say that the next inspiration, the next inspiring leader that would have the Congolese people's interest, like Lumumba did, who would come through the masses and be on top of the country to make this great decision for his people, is not going to be killed as well?
Well, that's a very real threat. And in fact, the current president, Joseph Kabila, his father was assassinated, and I would assume the assassination happened precisely because of what you just said. Um, he was the first one to turn away from Rwanda and the U.S., and not long afterwards he was assassinated. And
Mhm.
his son is following in his footsteps. And I'm not saying the current president is a great man of any kind. There's plenty of problems in the Congolese government and corruption and whatnot, but that happens in every poor country. Corruption is a part of poverty, really,
Mhm.
on that level. So, and the current president, he's also in danger of being assassinated because he's not just allowing Rwanda to take over the country.
Mhm. So, should the policy of the Congo and the Congo people, wherever they are around the world, to assassinate anybody in the Western world who is against the Congo? Because this is the policy of the rest of the world's governments.
Well,
Should that be their mission?
yeah, when you phrase it like that, it makes all the hypocrisy very obvious as how we treat the Congo. We overlook atrocities in the Congo, but if it were to happen in the U.S., for example, the example you gave about the home invasion, if someone invaded the U.S. and demanded to negotiate, we would not support that.
Mhm.
Um, but we don't we don't have accountability for the leaders of the Congo who are assassinated. We overlook it. And so when you phrase the question the way you did, you really point out the hypocrisy that's in our policy towards the Congo.
Mhm. So, do you think if Congolese people around the world had some kamikazes, it's out of lack of name of a Congolese name to call these people, who would go around the world assassinating people who are against the Congo? Do you think that would make a statement?
um, it definitely would make a statement. I don't think it would be an effective tactic. Um, I think it would actually probably have a backlash effect. Um, just another reason for people to be anti-Congo. Unfortunately.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I don't think that would work. That's my opinion.
Well, what if they just killed the heads of these mineral companies that are sponsoring their wars?
Well, I think under the modern economy, the heads of these companies are so rich and powerful that, they'd be hard to get to, first of all. But I think it would create a similar backlash. And in the U.S., we view our very rich on status with politicians. So it's hard to separate in the U.S. the difference between a billionaire and a congressman, and sometimes they're the same people.
Mhm. So, are you saying in the U.S. the people identify the interest of the rich, even though they're poor and they have no interest whatsoever?
Um, I don't think everyone does. I think the media intends us to view it like that. But I think many people do in the U.S. But I think the average working person or poor person knows better. But our government does not know better, and they would treat a situation like that as one of the same, I think. The U.S. is very protective of its very rich.
Mhm. Wow. So now the ways that are left to resist um, and to protest and to put things out there is, like you were saying, to bring awareness. Now, what are the best ways that you have found that people can bring attention and awareness and educate people about this?
Well, as you know, we live in the age of social media. That's very helpful. I think there's so many African immigrant groups in the U.S. who I think would care deeply for this subject and could organize um, in favor of it, and Africans in general living in the U.S. Um, who I think, if they knew the truth, would feel a strong affiliation for this cause and feel encouraged to organize
Mhm.
in favor of the Congolese. But I
Mhm.
think it would take some serious community outreach, and these different community groups to really be engaged on the subject and say enough is enough.
Yeah. So an all-African movement, an international all-African movement, just like it was for South Africa a while ago, and to bring awareness and to say, enough is enough, like you're saying.
Yeah, enough is enough, and quit meddling with Africa. Right now, there is a giant. They're calling it the race for Africa. China and the U.S. is having all these proxy wars to control Africa.
Mhm.
You have it in the Sudan, which has been cut into two countries now. Um, and you have it in Somalia. You have U.S. Military forces are all over Africa, and they're trying to gain it for U.S. corporations, and they're trying to push China away. And I think it would be a profound movement internationally to say, hands off of Africa, enough is enough. Um, let the Congolese live in peace independently. Quit creating these wars all over Africa, um, in which they're blaming the Africans. We have our
Wow.
we have
So,
go ahead.
no, I was just thinking that you were African in your previous life.
That's a kind compliment. Thank you.
Nice. Very, very nice. And what were you going to say?
I lost my train of thought actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's really great because if the people in the West can be conscious of what their government are doing, then they can definitely help in stopping what's happening. So it's because the people are complacent and they're not aware of what's going on that they let it happen. But otherwise, you're saying that if people were aware that it would not happen. They would not allow the governments to get away with spending their tax money as they do.
Absolutely. And the problem is there is very little way of knowing what's happening in the U.S. If you read the New York Times, the Washington Post, the mainstream media in general, the information you're getting about the Congo is horrible. It's full of misinformation. It explains nothing. So
Yeah.
people really can't get educated about what's happening.
Yeah. That's why I was so shocked to receive your article. I was like, who is this? And who is allowing him to write this stuff?
Well, there's very few people. Noam Chomsky has done some good writing on the Congo, but really outside of him, there's very few people who write about this and who really know what's happening because the media and the government has done such a good job in hiding the facts.
Mhm. So tell people where they can find you and where you publish your work, and how they can be informed or how they can join you in your work.
Well, the main website that I write for is Workers Compass. So that's one word, workerscompass.org. But a good U.S. website that deals with Congolese news more comprehensively is called Black Agenda Report. Um, and that's Glenn Ford is the editor and main writer of that website. It's an excellent resource, and they have some very good articles on the Congo that are good for sharing.
Yeah. And how did you get in the global research?
I think I'm not sure how many years ago, but I just sent the editor an article of mine, and he liked it. And ever since then, they've been pretty open to publishing my stuff.
Yeah, and they even translate them, for the Canadians in French and English. So it's really great.
Yeah, it's a good website.
Mhm. Wow. Well, thank you so much for clearing up so much of the situation about Congo. Is there something that you wanted to add before we let you continue your very busy and active life?
I just want to thank you for allowing me to be on the show, and I hope your listeners are inspired to tell others about this information and do more research themselves, and ideally form the nucleus of a movement that can stop this.
Yes, and thank you so much. I mean, thousands of people are going to hear this and share this, and it will definitely contribute to those great actions that we need from people out there. And please keep in touch. We need you to keep updating us and updating our listeners to what's really, really going on.
I'd love to. My pleasure.
All right. So have a great evening.
You too. Thank you very much.
All right. Wow, international people, thank you so much for being with us. And that was Seamus Cook, all the way from here in the United States, so informed about the situation in Congo. Now, you heard what he said. He did not take my suggestion of assassinating people. So, I guess don't use assassinations. Yeah. But he said, organize yourself and bring awareness to the situation and educate people, because people are responsible for their own governments, and people are the ones paying all this money, sponsoring all this blood. So, which means that people are the ones that can change it. And as far as we're concerned, as the media, we will keep just broadcasting the truth of our world wherever it exists, wherever we can find it, and we will keep bringing you more interesting people that know what's really going on. And we will just keep trying to counterbalance the main media, which is not saying anything about anything. I don't even know why they exist. I need to take over CNN. Anyways, so this is one of our last shows this year, December 6th. We only have like 1 or 2 shows left, and then we will go on holiday, and we will see you back in January. Thank you, my international people, for being with us. Thank you for sending us your comments, your questions. You keep the show very interesting, and I just keep the show talking. You and I talk. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to have spoken to such an inspiring person about Congo, because this is a very tricky situation. So you received the information. Now it's up to you to decide what to do with it. Have a great evening. Stay blessed. Louise Uachu from Vancouver.